Hey guys, what's up? This video here is just talking a little bit about something that I've actually had a little bit of a hard time finding on the various different outlets that I go to. Actually, originally I found out about it on the trending feed thing on Facebook that they have up in the corner if you're using it on a desktop or whatever. But at any rate, what I am talking about is the remastered HD Resident Evil Remake re-release. That's a lot of re, but and the ironic thing about this whole thing is the day that this was announced, the day before I followed Jim Sterling on Twitter, he made a joke about how we're in a new console generation and Capcom hasn't revealed a remake of Resident Evil yet, and then the next day there's this news about this. So, at first I was kind of like, oh, at first when I read the title, I was like, oh, cool, and then I started reading the article, and I was kind of let down a little bit because I was like, oh, it's just a prettier version of the GameCube remake of the first game. So I was kind of like, yeah. But then my initial thought was, okay, while it's a classic and it's a great game and yada yada yada, I'm going to try not to reiterate everything you probably already know about the original Resident Evil. I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to play that game again with those tanky ass controls, but then in the article it states that, they'll have the classic tank controls or they'll have a little bit more modern controls to it. They don't say if you can aim and walk at the same time, which I highly doubt you'll be able to. But it's coming out for the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and the PC, and it will be 1080p on those three platforms. It's also coming out for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, and I believe in the article I read it said it'll be 720p for those ones. And then it'll also support 5.1 surround sound. Now the interesting thing is you can play the game in the original 4.4:3 aspect ratio, or you can play it in 16:9. And if you play it in 16:9, the camera won't stay fixed the entire time. Like what I'm gathering from reading the article is it's not an over-the-shoulder perspective, but it will kind of move around and zoom in on you a little bit as you move around the room that you're in or whatever. So I mean, that's kind of neat. They're freshening it up a little bit, and at the same time, it is an HD remaster. They're touching up some textures. I think they're redoing some of the character models, but it's not like it's a game that came out at the end of the PlayStation 3 life cycle, like say The Last of Us or Tomb Raider, or anything like that. This is a game that the remake came out in 2002, so it's been 12 years since that. And oh God, when did I think the original Resident Evil came out in? Was it 97? 1996, I think. 1996. And, so I mean, it's been almost 20 years. But, at first I was kind of like, this is just typical Capcom stuff too, where they're just going to retread some stuff. But the more I thought about it, and actually, video by Rich over at Review Tech USA kind of touched upon the same thought I was having. Is this is a way for Capcom also to gauge interest and viability in the franchise. They did something similar, if you'll recall, at the beginning of the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 era. They came out with the HD remaster of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. It took them forever because the animation company or the art company, whoever was doing the art for that game, really dragged their feet. But it sold well, people loved it, and then boom, here comes Street Fighter 4, So this is a good way of them kind of getting a feel what people want and things like that. And a lot of hardcore Resident Evil fans have been wanting a return to that less action-oriented game and more of like the survival horror. And I think survival horror now, especially, is kind of sort of making a resurgence. You know, if you to varying degrees of success. I mean, you have a game like Daylight, which yeah, kind of meh. Um, Going back so far to the PlayStation 3 era, the first Dead Space was a phenomenal game. It was creepy and there was a lot of tension, and you could walk and aim at the same time. But if you played that game on like I think from like normal on up, I mean, you had to make your shots count, and it wasn't constant action like Resident Evil 6 or Resident Evil 5 or Dead Space 3. It kept you a little tense, and the moments were sparse. And to this day, the level with the Regenerator, I think it was called, but the Necromorph that was created by the scientist, I can't remember his name now either. It's been a while since I played Dead Space. That constantly regenerates, and he's hunting you through the level. That was one of the scariest fucking levels in a video game I've played in a long time, maybe even since. But you know, if you can take one of the few things that Resident Evil 6 did right, and I don't hate Resident Evil 6 like a lot of people, but one of the few things it did right was the controls and the gunplay and everything like that. If you can take the fluidness of the controls and the way everything interacted in Resident Evil 6, if you're going to stick with enemies that can shoot, you need to really upgrade your cover system, Capcom. But and combine that with the suspense and the survival horror aspect of the original 2-3 games in the franchise, I think they'd really be on to something. They'd please a lot of people. You'd please definitely the hardcore Resident Evil people, but you wouldn't have that archaic tank style controls. I think Revelations was sort of a step in the right direction. The first part of Leon's campaign in Resident Evil 6 was a step in the right direction too, but then they kind of blew it with Chris's and Jake Mueller's. I even liked Ada's campaign a little bit. But I mean, you know, if they can just step back and really look at the franchise and try to find a nice balance between what apparently they think they want. I don't know. Capcom as a company in general them and Square Enix are pretty out of touch with what they think people want. But if they can strike that right balance between the action that they have in like Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6, and that suspense and horror element that they had in those first few games, then I think they'd really be on to something. And I like I said, I think they'd please both the average gamer and the hardcore Resident Evil fan. I really kind of hope they don't do the reboot route, because that was kind of my fear. They kind of had mentioned it in passing, but nothing ever came of it. I'm kind of tired of seeing franchises rebooted. I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It worked in the case of Tomb Raider. I felt that game was a step in a really good direction for that franchise, because the other games were kind of sort of getting stale, and I know I'm probably going to get a lot of shit for that. Devil May Cry. If you're going to reboot a franchise, please don't end it where you have so many unanswered questions like they did with Devil May Cry 4. But, you know, I mean, I think they can keep building on their established lore that they have in these 6 games and their offshoots without having to have this fresh start and reboot it, and but refine the gameplay and the overall elements of the game so that you can have this experience that people remember so fondly from those original games. But we'll see what happens after the release of this. I have a feeling it'll probably sell decently well. It's on enough platforms that just about every person that is a fan of those original games, and that game in particular, will probably buy it. You also probably see a lot of people that didn't have a GameCube or a Wii, because the remake did come out on the Wii. And I think they called it like the Resident Evil Chronicles, something, I can't remember. But you know, there's people out there that don't have Nintendo platforms that never got to play that remake. Now they'll get the chance. I mean, there's some sales there, so you know, we'll see how it does. Hopefully, it does well, and we get some new Resident Evil games. I'm pretty sure. I'm almost positive they had started development on Resident Evil 7. So whether or not the success or failure of this re-release will have an impact on the development of that game is yet to be seen. But we'll see what happens. And forgive me for some of my crappy playing in this footage because I'm kind of rusty with these third-person games. I haven't played Resident Evil 6 in quite a long time, but I didn't want to talk about Resident Evil with like Diablo or Borderlands footage in the background, you know. So, but anyways, guys, I want to thank everybody for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. All right.